with Life Changing.
Welcome to Life Changing, which may sound a little different today because we're in a tent on the Welsh borders at the Hay Literary Festival. Hello, Hay. In very good spirits, and hello, of course, to you at home too. A different setting then, but the premise remains the same. A guest with an extraordinary story about a moment in life which transforms everything. That guest is Paul Kohler, and the moment came as he was relaxing with his family before a dramatic and traumatic turn of events. Paul is an MP, but he hasn't talked in detail and in public about what happened until now, and he's chosen this programme to do so. Hello, Paul.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, thank you for coming. We should say this is not a political interview, but you are obviously a politician, Liberal Democrat MP for the London seat of Wimbledon, which you won in 2024.
Yes.
And you were also an academic and a nightclub owner, which is quite a heady mix, I think. So tell us, where's the club and where did you teach?
The club is in Covent Garden, cellar door. It was once a disused toilet that we converted, and I taught, at the time of what I'm going to tell you about, at SOAS. I was head of the law school at SOAS. Mm-hmm. I've also taught at Oxford, UCL and Queen Mary. And
SOAS is the School of Oriental and African Studies in London. You're a senior lecturer, weren't you, in law?
Yes.
Tell us what your life was like back then, your family life.
We had lived in Wimbledon for 25 years. My wife, our 4 daughters, a comfortable life in leafy Wimbledon. Really, it was stable. It was lovely. It was family life.
So there's Samantha, your wife, who's here in the audience today. Daughters Eloise, Saskia, Bethany, Tamara.
That's right.
Yeah. But we're going to go to the 11th of August 2014. There's you at home with Samantha and Eloise and her boyfriend. What was the evening like up until the moment we're going to talk about?
It was a balmy summer evening. My wife and I were downstairs playing cards. Eloise was at the top of the house with her boyfriend, and my other 3 daughters were out in Wimbledon in bars and pubs. Sam had just popped upstairs. There was a knock at the door, and I went to answer it, and I assumed it was one of my daughters coming back with their friends. As I opened the door, they pushed through, and I thought it was they were drunk. They sort of fell through the door, and I thought it was just her friends pushing through the door because they were drunk. I soon realised they were wearing balaclavas.
How many?
4 of them. So they started attacking me and immediately shouting, "Where's the money?" And they kept using the definite article, "the money." They were searching for a particular debt, it felt like. And I retreated down the hall with them raining blows on me, and of course completely shocked by this. And I stupidly shouted up to my wife upstairs, "Ring the police," immediately alerting them to the fact that she was upstairs. So 2 of them rushed upstairs to confront her. They didn't attack her physically, but they made her lie down on the floor. They put a hood over her head and threatened her, whilst the other 2 carried on beating me. My wife didn't make the same mistake as me. She didn't shout up to Eloise, so she didn't alert them to the fact Eloise was further up the house.
Why do you call it a mistake?
Well, if I basically told them my wife was upstairs. I didn't need to alert them by shouting to her and telling them she's there. They immediately went up there to confront her.
And how fierce was the attack? What were they doing? Can you remember?
Yeah, it was a ferocious attack. I fell to the ground, and then you get up, or the adrenaline shooting through you. And at one point, they got gaffer tape out to gaffer tape my mouth, and losing your voice is absolutely a terrifying moment. It gave me a shot of adrenaline, and even though they were younger and fitter than me, I had the strength to get up, push them off and fight again, because I did not want to lose my voice at that point. I was knocked down again. At that point, a heavy wooden door fell off one of our cabinets, and one of them grabbed the wooden door and started saying again, remember they're saying, "Where's the money? Where's the money?" All the way through this, that's the constant refrain. He brought the heavy wooden door and then stopped just before hitting me. He said, "Where's the money?" The obvious threat was, "Tell us, or we'll bring the door down on your head." I haven't said this, but I hope it's obvious. There was no money. My guess is it was a drug debt they were chasing. They'd gone to the wrong house. So there was no money to give them. Twice he threatened to bring the wooden door down on my head. And then, as I couldn't give him the answer he wanted, the third time, he was about to bring it down, and I think he was, well, I'm absolutely certain he was trying to dispatch me at that point because he was so frustrated. And that's when 2 brave police officers rushed through the door and saved my life.
Gosh.
Throughout this fight, this brawl, you are watching it from outside. I don't know why, but you see yourself being beaten up. It felt like I was part of a gangster movie. I was being beaten up in a gangster movie. That's what it felt like. And it suddenly hits you, my goodness, I might not survive this. And well, it's clearly terrifying. My daughter, who lay undiscovered at the top of the house, she wanted to rush down when she heard what was happening. Her boyfriend stopped her. I said, for goodness sake, don't do that. Let's ring the police. She rang the police. I'm very fortunate where I live in Wimbledon. The police station is a few hundred yards from our house. They came within 8 minutes of the call.
8 minutes?
8 minutes. 2 brave officers, a male and a female officer. They could hear what was happening. They were told to wait for backup, and they didn't. They decided to rush in because they could see, or they could hear, it was a sort of fever pitch. So they bravely ignored what they were told, rushed through the door that was ajar, and rushed into the dining room. And one of them leapt on the attacker just as he was bringing down the wooden door on my head, and stopped it happening. And sort of sailed through the air and took him out. Other officers came, they'd gone upstairs. 2 ran away, 2 were arrested on the night, 2 were arrested in the subsequent days.
Tell me about the injuries that you sustained.
There's lots of internal bleeding, broken nose, fractured eye socket.
Could you see? If you had
I
eye
thought
socket?
I'd lost my sight in my left eye for a couple of days because I couldn't see anything out of it at all. But I was fortunate. And then, of course, you're rushed into hospital. You're then left there, of course, and they rightly told, because Sam went to hospital with me, but my wife, but then she had to leave. And so through the night, you're sleeping there, and of course, you're in a curtained segment of the ward, and you're terrified every time you think what's behind the curtain. You start imagining the attackers coming back.
Yeah, you're still on high alert.
Yeah.
You're still in that threat state.
Yeah.
But you had some facial injuries which they had to sort out in hospital.
Yes, the pictures are pretty horrible. The picture, because the police rightly took a picture on the night, but they couldn't use that for publicity purposes because it was too horrific. So that morning, they took another picture of me when the blood was dry and I'd been cleaned up a bit, and that was the picture that was used in the press.
I have seen the picture. It does not look like you. You're black and blue, your eyes are swollen, so swollen that you can barely see. I don't know whether that was the...
Well, that's the second picture.
Is that the second picture?
The first
It was
one
worse than that?
is worse than that.
Really?
Yeah. It's absolutely appalling. It is out there now on the internet, actually. It's frightening. Even now it frightens me when I see it.
And what about your wife and daughter? Did they go back to the house?
They did. My brother fantastically rushed up from Cambridge to look after them, so he rushed up and stayed with them. Neighbours came to help, and the community rallied round and the family rallied round.
That must have been hard, going back into a place that had been the location for such a difficult, traumatic experience.
It was. My wife's a hugely brave character, and she just wanted to go back in.
And what about your daughter?
It's very difficult for my daughter, because she's at the top of the house, hearing what she thought was her parents being murdered. So in her place of safety, she heard this terrible thing happening. So she was the most affected, I think, by the attack, and she moved out a few months later with her boyfriend. She couldn't stay in the house.
So when you were discharged from hospital, what was it like for you going back into your home?
You felt like you wanted to reclaim the territory, and the first time I was alone downstairs, either that day or the next day, I had this almost visceral urge to lie down in each of the places where I'd been attacked and look up and capture a vista that didn't have the attacker in my eye line. This is very intense, these memories. I remembered exactly the 3 points where I'd been on the floor being beaten by 1 or 2 of them. And I looked up and just recaptured the vista without their faces, and that felt really important.
Why do you think it was important? What was that about for you?
It was reclaiming my territory, I think. It was reclaiming my view of the room, And I had this very intense image of them there, which I don't have anymore, because I recaptured the room from that angle, looking up and not seeing them. And that really helped.
I wonder, would it not have been that the police came so quickly within 8 minutes? Have you allowed yourself to think what might have happened?
I assume I would be dead now. Those 2 officers saved my life, I'm sure of that.
Do they know that?
Yes, I want to thank them. I appeared for one of them in a subsequent case where he was charged with something to say what he had saved my life.
Were you having flashbacks, nightmares? I work a lot with people with post-traumatic stress disorder, and I don't know whether any of you experienced those kind of traumatic symptoms.
I had some nightmares early on, but not after a few weeks. Much of that subsided. It's shocking. I never asked my daughter or my wife whether they had nightmares. I should have done.
That goes back to the guilt, isn't it? It's
Yes.
almost like when I ask you a question about you, you have your daughter and your wife in mind all the time. Did I do enough? Did I do enough?
Yes, and you do blame yourself for mistakes you made and putting them in danger, because that desire to protect your family is strong, and you think you didn't always at every point make the right decision.
The following year, your attackers were sent to prison for between 13 and 19 years. And I read that you and your wife and daughter were able to see them being talked to by the judge in court. And you described that as visceral to watch. Why?
It was hugely important, which is why recent legislation on trying to force perpetrators to be there for sentencing is so important. Because the way Kingston Crown Court is laid out, you cannot see the accused from the public gallery. The judge was aware of that we were there but couldn't see them during the trial. So the judge asked that we come into the body of the court so we could see them when the sentence was read and when the judge gave her sentence.
What was your reaction to that? Because it would have been the first time you'd have seen them, no, since the day itself.
Yeah, it was. We definitely started trembling when we saw the attackers, so that felt very... It was a terrifying moment, because it brought back, of course, what had happened in a very visceral way, that these were our attackers sitting in front of us.
What did you feel when your attackers were sentenced? Was between 13 and 19 years enough?
Yes, it was an important point where I felt a sort of cathartic feeling. They had now received a very, very long sentence that was rightly deserved. The judge, who was utterly brilliant, she had listed, because I'd given my victim statement to the court, I'd read that, and the judge made reference to what I'd said in that statement. That felt really important.
What did you say?
Had heard. I explained my anger with them for what they'd done to my family home, and I made the point that some of the press had turned the fight into a anti-immigrant, anti-Polish attacks. My attackers happened to be Polish. So I made the point, you had also sullied the name of the Polish community, who was so incredibly supportive. I had literally thousands of emails from the Polish community. So I made the point that they had sullied the name of a great nation.
I remember that at the time, actually, they were described as Polish thugs, weren't they, in the press?
Yes. It was in the middle of summer where there weren't many news stories. Our story became very much a story that was on the front page of the news all week. I was on the radio, and I was saying on the radio, I used the phrase, why me? Why did it happen? And the charity Why Me, a Restorative Justice charity, heard me talking about it. So they contacted me and said, we can help you explore that question of why it happened, perhaps arrange for you to speak to one of the attackers at some point. So the counselling I had was them talking to me about that possibility.
What was your first reaction?
I was very keen, because that's why the charity's name is so perfect, because I really wanted to find out why they had attacked me. What was it all about? So I really wanted to do so. My wife was more reticent, but loyally said if I wanted to do it, she would do it as well. My daughter seemed keen to do it as well, but her boyfriend wanted nothing to do with it.
It's such an individual thing, restorative justice, isn't it? And we should make that clear. It is not suitable for everyone, and some people will not want to do it. When the charity first approached you, did you all have different ideas about what you wanted to to ask.
Yes, completely different. So I was all about the past, why did you do it? Samantha, on the other hand, was all about the present. She wanted to tell them how angry she was about the incident. Whilst Eloise wanted to talk about the future. She wanted to talk about how they were going to change their lives, which we thought at the time was young and sort of romantic view of life. But in fact, her question was the only question we actually pursued in the end, because that was the most important question.
So after you'd agreed, what happened then? How many of the 4 did you get to see?
It emerged only one was suitable. Some didn't want to do it, others were thought unsuitable, but one wanted to do it. The chap who tried to bring down the wooden door on my head. So in fact, the one I most wanted to see was the one we did see. We went into a high-security prison. I'd never been into a high-security prison.
What was that like?
They are terrifying places, actually. They feel immediately dehumanising. So that scared you, put you on edge. And then we met the chaplain, who was the go-between, who was very much the person who was acting as the support of the perpetrator. And we sat down in a half circle, and then he came in.
I know we're not using his name for confidentiality reasons. When he walked through that door and you saw him coming towards you, what was that like?
He was clearly terrified. He was trembling. He's a young man in his late 20s, early 30s, looking down on the ground, looking to the chaplain for support. It was quite empowering to us, actually, in a way, because what was, until that point, a demon who had tried to destroy our family was now a somewhat pathetic individual walking in, looking distraught and worried. And that, of course, changed the power relationship. Suddenly, he wasn't the demon who was about to kill me. He was someone who one felt almost sorry for. Some contempt for, I suppose, as well. I don't think they were all pure emotions.
So you had this sense of almost forgiveness, pity, perhaps, when you saw him?
Yeah, I wouldn't say forgiveness yet, but I'm definitely moving that way.
Right.
And then then he sat down, and we start a rather faltering discussion. He has a translator. He's learnt some English. He's been learning English in prison for this and for his rehabilitation. We were allowed to ask our questions.
Who went first?
It was me, my wife, and then my daughter.
What was the answer when you asked your question, why?
He wouldn't tell me. He actually wouldn't tell me. And if you think about it, it's obvious he wouldn't have told me, because it was some sort of gangland attack. He's not going to tell me why, because presumably someone who told him to do that isn't there, wasn't charged, and is still unknown to the police. He's not going to reveal those facts, because that will just get him into more trouble after his failed mission.
You weren't getting anything out of him on that. And what about Sam, asking him, do you know how it made me feel?
Yeah, Sam looked him in the eyes directly and said, do you know how this made me feel? And then started listing how angry she was, and he stopped her. And he said, I know how angry you were. I know on the night, because he was one of the 2 caught on the night. So I know on the night, I saw your face on the night. I know how angry you were. And so she didn't need to tell him, he already knew. And then he apologised. He said, I'm sorry to my wife and what I put you through. I'm sorry that I did this. And that was quite early on in this. It was a meeting that lasted over 2 hours, I think. That was quite early on. And then, of course, it seems obvious now, the whole rest of the meeting was testing the authenticity of his apology. And the only way to test the authenticity of his apology was to explore my daughter's question, which is, how are you going to change your life? Because if you are really you really mean this apology, you've got to have plans to become a different person. So we spent over an hour talking about how he was going to change his life, which is why my daughter was absolutely right to have that as her principal question.
And what did he say?
He said he was taking English lessons. He had a young child that I think had been born when he was in prison. He wanted that relationship with his child. He wanted to actually get a skill. He was clearly bright. He'd clearly gone down some terrible paths in his life. And he felt genuine genuinely like he wanted to change. And I suppose what was most authentic about it was that I can't promise I will. I will do my best, but I can't promise. And I thought that added to the authenticity of his apology and his plans. Towards the end of the meeting, we got up and I shook his hand. That's the point in my head I actually forgave him. And that was empowering. And I've previously described that almost as a selfish act, because when you forgive, you're no longer subject to their control. Samantha also shook his hand, and to this day, she doubts whether she should have done. I think her view is I'd done it. It was part of the sort of the manners of the moment. She did as well. She has regrets that she went that far. She would have rather, I think, not shaken his hand, and my daughter did as well. And for my daughter, it was wonderful because it demythologized the beast. This was the beast that had attacking her parents. She'd thought about, she'd heard about, she'd imagined in her bedroom. Now she was looking him in the eye and seeing him as this rather sad individual who's going to spend a long time in jail. After the meeting, she came back to live in the house for a while, so it helped her hugely, absolutely hugely.
So she hadn't been back at the house?
No, she moved out soon after the attack with her boyfriend, but moved back after the meeting. And I think that was an important point, that it was no longer how she associated with the attack in the same way.
And does Sam still worry about shaking?
I was asked, I gave a presentation to some police officers on restorative justice a few months ago, and they asked me, does your wife regret actually going to the meeting? I thought, my goodness, I've never actually asked her that question. So going back home, I said, do you regret the meeting? She said, no, I'm glad I went to the meeting. I just have doubts whether I should have actually shaken his hand.
That is one of the criticisms of restorative justice. It does have a lot of supporters, but there will be some who say, from the victims' or survivors' perspective, it can feel like a coercion or like something they have to do or are obliged to do. And that's quite a pressure.
It is, which is why we must never, ever say people must do restorative justice. It's there, it's a possibility, and the counselling you get beforehand is crucial in making sure people don't feel that.
The narrative around how these men were described in the media propelled you into thinking differently, didn't it, about what you wanted to do with life?
A narrative was being imposed on what had happened. Because this is in 2014, before the Brexit vote and everything. My story was used by the Leave campaign. So I felt really very, very angry about that, and shouting at the TV at these things when you see this,
Were you?
Your narrative being stolen from you. And I felt really angry on behalf of the Polish community, who I cannot emphasise how important they were. And I remember one moment, this Polish lady came up to me, and it always makes me want to cry. She came up to me and just sort of hugged me in the street, because everyone could see, I still had all the injuries and stuff. And I just held her hand and said, no one should be blamed for the worst people in their society. It was just such a wonderful moment. She was so humiliated on behalf of her country because of what they had done. Of course, that was so unfair to them. And that felt so important to me, that you should not blame these allies of Britain for so long for what these four people had done. Soon afterwards, the police station from whence my saviours had come, the Mayor of London wanted to close it down. So I started campaigning to save the police station. So I'm campaigning to save the police station. I'm angry that my narrative has been stolen, and shouting at the TV. My wife eventually said to me, stop shouting at the TV, go out and do something. And then one of my daughters said to me, Dad, why don't you join me in the Lib Dems? And so I joined her in the Lib Dems. The rest is history. I ended up being an MP.
You ended up being an MP. I'm wondering whether actually, I don't know how much you knew about the restorative justice system while you were lecturing in law. Did you know much about it?
Well, the answer is I knew nothing about it, but I should have done, because as a leader in restorative justice, particularly on the international sphere.
But it just wasn't on your course.
It's not. I was a property and trust. I talked about Aboriginal land rights and land law, not about restorative justice. So I knew nothing and soon learnt a lot about it. It's not a panacea, but the beauty of restorative justice is it puts the victim at the heart of the criminal justice system. And the problem with our system of criminal justice is often the victims on the sidelines. They are just a bit of the evidence.
How is life different for you and the family since that night?
As a family, we would be the same strong bond we are. I have 4 amazing daughters, and that's down to my amazing wife. So we have a very strong family.
Well, and you, it takes 2.
Yeah, well, yes. Yeah, ask her about that. Anyway, yeah.
Oh, I'm trying to seek her out in the audience now to see what sort of sign she's giving me.
The family bond is as strong as it was, perhaps stronger. All adversity brings you closer together. I still feel, as you picked up, certain guilt on certain bits, which I didn't do as well as I should have done. But had it not happened, I wouldn't be here today, I wouldn't be in Parliament, I wouldn't be doing these things, and it gave me a new route in life. So I have this bizarre conflict between, it was a terrible moment, but it changed my life.
I wonder when you'll let go of that guilt. You were being attacked by 2 younger men, brutally. How much more could you have done?
I could have done more.
Recovery from trauma is a complex process. Where are you now as a sort of individual? Do you think back on, I mean, apart from the fact we're talking about it now, do you look back on that moment, that time? Do bits of memory come back to you at all?
When we're in Parliament talking about criminality and violent crime, then it comes back. Even now, I can't watch a fight scene on TV in a drama or in a film. I have to turn away. So I don't like that aspect. That it comes back at those moments. But I think it's, in a positive, it's informed my belief in a criminal justice system that reforms people. That's strongly there. And that's something I want to fight for, because we don't reform people in this country like we should do and we must do. And that's something I strongly believe in.
Paul Kohler, we are so grateful for you talking to us about your story. Thank you very much. And for doing it in front of an audience, which, MP or not, when you're talking about something so personal, can't be easy. And also thanks to Sam. As I say, she's been in the audience, and I know she doesn't like listening to you talking about it, and it can be quite emotional, understandably, for her too. And thanks to the audience at Hay for being such wonderful and attentive listeners. Thank you. Don't forget, you can catch up with all our amazing guests by subscribing to Life Changing on BBC Sounds. If you have a story to share, do email us. We're at lifechanging@bbc.co.uk. Until the next time, from me, from Paul, and from Hay on Wye, goodbye.